I hadn't a clue what I was doing, but it was an incredible learning experience. Little maths I had probably done on the business were unfortunately probably very, very wrong. You're just putting money into the black box and they're not really sure what it's actually returning. Your numbers are just as important as the product that you're going to sell.
Hey folks, welcome back to the StoreHero podcast. Delighted to be joined by my usual co-hosts here, but going to hopefully turn things around a little bit and put Thomas in the hot seat today. So I suppose as we heard in the intro, Thomas, today is really in a deeper dive on learning lessons that you learned so other people don't have to. Hopefully try to avoid them for others.
Hopefully.
Kind of an old Warren Buffett quote. Yeah, so I suppose to kick off, your stories about you. How did it start? Where did it actually come from?
Where did it go wrong? Yeah, so Stories About You was my first e-commerce business. I actually set it up back in 2014, 10 years ago at this stage. It doesn't certainly feel like it, and it does in other ways. But basically, Stories About You was a collection of personalized children's storybooks that I actually wrote myself and collaborated on randomly with my granddad of all people. He's a fantastic artist, and he actually did all the illustrations and painted them for all of the books. So we had one about hurling, Gaelic football, Christmas, primary school. I think there was one more in there as well. But yeah, essentially personalized books you pop in. For instance, the hurling book was about a young lad coming on in the All Ireland final, scoring the winning goal, getting man of the match, and it could be tailored to an individual child. You put in the child's name, their club, their county, their favorite hurler, the opposition county, just really kind of when they were reading the book, it was all about themselves, and it was definitely they were quite special. Definitely, I have to say. So you get the odd message here and there from people who still have them in their houses and come across them. So yeah, it was an interesting business to get started. I think I set it up when I was probably 18 or 19. So it was definitely a massive learning curve. Won't say I made much money from it or anything like that, but it was a really, really steep learning curve, and I suppose definitely set me on the path to, setting up StoreHero 10 years later. So here we are.
Sure, I'm sure it'll be kind of familiar to people as we kind of chat, but how maybe some of these kind of hard-fought lessons become the thing we annoy people on LinkedIn about today and try to get people not to make the same mistakes. So I suppose to kind of dig in and keep this as substantive as possible for people, um, naturally, I think one thing we see with a lot of e-commerce founders is they don't often start with an accountancy mindset. Here, I'm going to build a business off this gross margin with this profit margin, scale to this number of units equals this company valuation. If it were only that simple and methodical, it would be probably a very boring business to run. But anyway, I suppose it doesn't start like that. It often starts with a core passion and an idea within a specific discipline that kind of expands into a commercial opportunity. So how did that actually land for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something I suppose we can see resonate with a lot of Story Hero customers, and even during my time at Shopify, certainly with a lot of Shopify users as well. To your point, like most businesses are started at home in the kitchen. They are passion projects. It's never been easier to start an e-commerce business. So, as a result, there's millions of Shopify stores now. The vast majority of them are, very, very middle to small size SMEs who are in a lot of cases doing it as a side project, as I was. I was actually working part-time in McDonald's during that time setting Stories About You up. So definitely something I can resonate with. And certainly from an accounting standpoint, I really didn't, being completely honest about it, didn't really know what I was doing. Um, yeah, I mean, it was a great experience, I have to say, having to, understanding how to source products overseas, how to set up a website for the first time, how to figure out how to run an email marketing campaign, how to set up Facebook ads, Google ads for the first time. Incredible learning experience, but I suppose the numbers definitely played second fiddle to the initial grunt work of actually having to figure out how to do all of that. And as a result, I think down the line, it probably cost me more than I knew at the time. Like looking back at it, I probably was setting up an e-commerce at the best time from a paid marketing standpoint, but I think probably, if I knew what I know now back then, maybe we wouldn't be here and having this conversation because I think in retrospect, I probably had incredible fundamentals. And I can even remember looking at the Facebook and Google Ads dashboards, like comparison to what I see now with a lot of users. The numbers were incredible. I think, unfortunately, from my perspective, I didn't really know or fully understand how, what was actually going on in the ad accounts and how that actually relate back to the finance of the business and trying to grow and scale an e-commerce business profitably. As I mentioned, I was only working part time. I'd set the business up just with savings that I would have had myself. And I suppose at the core of it, I was definitely, apprehensive and hesitant to spend too much money on Facebook or Google ads in case it went wrong. Um, and just to back to that original point, I suppose, had I been a bit more aggressive in the confidence of what I was actually looking at, I think we probably could have grown the business a hell of a lot more than we probably did at the time.
Interesting. And I know, I suppose, as part of our previous conversations, one big piece that has come up is around getting a true sense of your actual margins. And it's one thing we consistently run through with, brands who maybe have a floating idea within the team as to what their product margin is, but they
Yeah.
don't really truly understand the implication of all those variable costs. And I suppose practically, the difference between those values dramatically changes how much somebody can afford to spend on ads and stay profitable. So what did that look like in practice for yourself?
I mean, absolute finger in the air stuff. All of the red flags I would avoid everyone to avoid today was all the things I was doing. Just being completely honest about it. The average order value of the product was probably about 20 euros. So, in today's terms, that's a really small average order value. And, when we look at stores, we had plenty of really successful stores on StoreHero today that, run quite well on that type of average order value. But the key point there is that they're incredibly dialed into the margins and discounting that they're actually running to make that business profitable and worthwhile. I unfortunately had a 20 euro average order value at the time, but I just wasn't as dialed into that side of the business. I was giving everybody free shipping. It was 4 euro to ship the item. I was giving everybody who landed on the website a 20% discount. I hadn't really, figured out that I needed to pay VAT on that 20 euro as well.
Kind of
So
important.
it's kind of important, so by the time you actually extrapolate and take all those things out, I was quickly left with not really fully understanding why my Facebook ads, and when I looked at the monthly management accounts, Facebook ads look good. I wasn't even using Shopify at the time. I was using a platform called Volusion. I hadn't even heard of Shopify at the time, but the Volusion stats looked decent. Facebook ad account looked okay. I was spending peanuts really in the scheme of things, but it wasn't really, making money. I didn't really know why, but in retrospect now, I really know that I was just not as dialed in. I probably shouldn't have been giving everyone the discounts I was giving. I probably should have been charging people for shipping just relative to what it was costing me to ship and the actual gross margins that I had. And I probably didn't take into account just other smaller things. We were using a fulfillment provider, and I probably had just taken into account product cost as my total COGS. But that shipping cost that I was giving everyone for free, that was certainly COGS. The fulfillment to fulfill that order each time from the fulfillment provider, obviously certainly COGS as well. So I unfortunately think the little maths I had probably done on the business were unfortunately probably very, very wrong. And I think that definitely prevented me from scaling the business along with maybe the lack of comprehension around the data that I was looking at. I have to cut myself some slack. I was 18 or 19. I hadn't a clue what I was doing, but it was an incredible learning experience.
Yeah, 100%. And look, it's no surprise. I think everyone with any age, discipline, experience falls into the same challenge, more so because it it would have taken some divine intervention for things to line up with the right information to come to you to actually realize this, because practically it's easy to see that kind of revenue number coming in on your maybe Evolution dashboard, in that case with Shopify dashboard these days. Use that as a reference point for your decisions, because that's what's in front of you. You're working with what you have, the tools that you have. So like we can obviously consistently see that with brands of, you know, between five, four-figure businesses, maybe five-figure businesses up to eight-figure businesses still struggle with that, because the same fundamentals apply. People are getting into this industry a lot of the times due to a passion, a discipline that becomes a business, not kind of reverse engineering a kind of a business model, as we said. So definitely an interesting point. But one other point that you mentioned before, with regards, I suppose, acquisition. Naturally, you were making decisions using kind of maybe ROAS as the North Star.
Yeah.
You're senior CPA, but didn't fully appreciate that kind of curve, that diminishing marginal returns. And it's not easy explained even these days. Um, that you could have actually potentially spent a lot more and driven a lot more profit, even with the lower return. But that was not a conversation you had the kind of the language to maybe have, let alone the tools.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, looking back at it, I can't even remember. It was probably only a couple of hundred quid a month. It was nothing too substantive, really. But yeah, I was probably getting like a 6 or 7 ROAS, and once it would hit a five, I would turn off all the ads because I honestly just didn't understand what I was looking at. I kind of thought, well, I do have costs here. I wasn't completely, desensitized to that. I knew I had costs, but I hadn't really just done the maths to understand, when it was actually going to be profitable, or, I was getting a 6, 7 ROAS, and as soon as it went down to a five, I was like, maybe that doesn't sound right. Again, in retrospect, that is just an awful way to run the business because it was complete finger in the air stuff. And while it's concerning and maybe that's not how you should run a business, I still see it with a lot of people that kind of come onto the StoreHero platform for the first time. Not that they're doing that specifically, but more so the gauge of how we actually make the decisions is still a lot of kind of finger in the air stuff, guesswork stuff. And I think, if I was doing the business again, it would be extremely grounded from a financial standpoint to help me grow and understand how I was actually going to scale and scale profitably. And that's definitely something that we can see. When you can see the penny drop with some of the StoreHero customers today, it completely reorientates how they evaluate and make decisions. And brands who we've seen plenty of them, when we plug them in for the first time, often the brand can be extreme. The underlying fundamentals can be extremely strong, but what's preventing them from scaling is actually that they're using a wrong framework on which to make decisions. And that was certainly something I was doing, was just measuring the complete wrong things. It wasn't grounded in fact, and it was just honestly just, yeah, it's kind of frustrating to look back on it and really realize that I probably had a great business there, but what actually prevented me from scaling was just being confident enough to scale, really. But anyway, you live and you learn.
Yeah, definitely. And sure, look, that's the thing. It's emblematic of the conversations we're having. I don't even. This isn't an exaggeration. Like the far majority of businesses are still oriented towards both store hero users and when they first sign up, or people who are kind of interested before they get signed up, versus and in line, I suppose, with the broader industry is again trying to use the metrics they have in front of them to make those decisions. So it's completely understandable, but again, it limits the ability. You'll make different decisions if you say, my goal is to maximize the total profit in the business versus I want to get the best return on this ad with a lower level of spend. It's a completely different approach. Yeah, and you'll make different decisions with that in mind. But again, that's not something people maybe have the visibility to do. Um, I suppose from there, what are the other things that really stood out to you as kind of like lessons learned or pieces that you do differently if you could go back?
I think just not going as heavy on discounts. Again, I was extremely revenue orientated. It was easy to make the revenue go up if I would just put the discounts down. Sorry, more discounts, revenue would go up through the roof. Um, Again, I can see that with a lot of Store Hero customers and just broader Shopify customers as well. But that was ultimately sucking a lot of the margin out of the business that, looking back on, that was another huge problem that I had and prevented me from scaling again, was just simply looking at revenue as that kind of indicator of success every week, as opposed to maybe just not discounting as heavily. Probably should have been spending more on ads. But again, I think it came back to the fundamental same point of just not understanding my numbers well enough. It's funny, I mean, like we did a bit of PR during that time, and the ads were just getting much more efficient around that time. So we were actually on nationwide. The RTE team came down to the house actually in Ennis, and we did a nationwide shoot. And then we actually got on to Ireland AM another morning as well. And the ads were much more efficient, maybe in the week or two after that. But I probably should have been much more organized with those things coming up. Like your basic things that you take for granted today. There should have been email campaigns set up to go out immediately after that. The website and homepage should have been changed immediately after that. We should have had an offer ready for the day. Again, loads of stuff in retrospect that seemed completely obvious that you just don't think of at the time. As I said, I was working another full-time job at the time. I ran the business for probably 4 or 5 years, so there was a couple of different jobs within that time period as well. So I was busy, but I mean, there was loads of stuff that I did right, but plenty and plenty and plenty that I certainly got wrong as well. So yeah,
Definitely. Yeah, it makes sense. And I suppose over the thousands of books you've sold, like you're gonna, it's it's certainly enough to kind of be a big enough sample size where it's very emblematic, as you said, of what other people see on a kind of day-to-day basis. So
Like
it, yeah,
when we're looking at like if you were to redesign a new e-commerce business today, I think we've talked about this a couple of times. Like the four key pillars I'd look for, like really good gross margins, a CAC advantage, lean operating costs, and a high repeat purchase rate. If I hadn't been as free with the discounting, my gross margins were actually quite good. Like I know what they were. I just killed myself with them between the discounting and the free shipping. They were actually quite decent. Because of when I started running ads, 2014, 15, I definitely had a CAC advantage. I just honestly didn't realize it at the time. The repeat purchase rate, it wasn't amazing. There were gifts for people, but it wasn't bad either. I do roughly have a gauge on what that would have looked like at the time. And it was only myself, so it was a lean operating cost business. So like the four key things that I would look for if I was setting up a new e-commerce business, I kind of had three and a half of them. Again, I just unfortunately didn't have the confidence to scale it. Really, I was just very apprehensive, and I see this with a lot of StoreHero customers as well. Very apprehensive to just feed more money into the Facebook machine if you're not fully confident on what it's returning. I think that was really at the crux of the problems I can see now that I would have had back then. But it's certainly something I see with so many StoreHero users as well, is that Facebook can be seen as just money gobbling machine, but if it's efficient and you can actually see the material return coming back to you in the form of profitability, it doesn't really matter how much money you give Facebook. Don't think of it as a cost, see it as an investment. That's definitely what prevented me from scaling back then, but it's certainly an issue that we can see with so many StoreHero users before they come on board, is that they're just putting money into the black box and they're not really sure what it's actually returning. Is it profitable? I was getting hit with double attribution back then, maybe not to the level people are getting hit with it today, but it was certainly a problem back then as well. So, even though it was a long time ago and there's loads of mistakes, I do see a lot of parallels today with e-commerce businesses and how their decision making can unfortunately be inhibiting really good businesses. Like there's so many businesses that we plug into for the first time, but the underlying fundamentals are really, really strong, and it's the same point that's preventing them from scaling. In that the lack of understanding of how those functions of marketing and finance actually relate to each other is really what's preventing the business from scaling. It's not their product, it's not the website, it's not their average order value or conversion rate. It's that confidence to give it an extra bit of oomph and actually just try and scale things. But I could definitely resonate and empathize with a lot of e-commerce business owners out there today who are struggling to get their business to the next level.
definitely. And I think to your point, like even as you said, you were ticking a lot of the underlying boxes without maybe being as cognizant of it. Even though you didn't have the repeat purchase rate, if you're able to drive, again, like many brands can, profitable first time orders, then potentially the business model doesn't necessarily need that. The challenge we often see, as I'm sure you'll agree, is situations where you're not profitable on the first time customers and also you're not getting the repeats. So, you need to get profit from somewhere. There's only two potential categories people can fall into, and you need to kind of make decisions based on the reality of the businesses today. If you don't have clarity on those realities, that will make you miss opportunities, but also potentially, go too far in other cases. So it comes like that confidence piece is massive. Like at the end of the day, if there's a data component here, but there's also, a lot of times people are without clarity on the data, people will make emotional decisions based on kind of a lack of confidence and a lack of clarity as well.
That's how I would run the business completely. And
Mm,
that's exactly how I would advise everybody not to run their business, but that's how I would have done it. It was purely based on instinct, gut, and it wasn't unfortunately grounded in numbers as it should have been. Um, but yeah, look, running an e-commerce business, anyone listening to this can empathize it. You're doing 101 things a day. You don't have time to get into the weeds with absolutely everything, but we say this a lot, but e-commerce has definitely evolved from a marketing game to a game where your numbers are almost the most important piece of it, and you need to wrap the marketing and make the marketing fit around those numbers. And that's almost the foundation of the business, aside from the product. It's like getting those fundamentals and foundations built first, and almost build your product around what those fundamentals and foundations need to be in order for you to scale the business. Because, passion project e-commerce is probably the mainstay of most new e-commerce upstarts, because it's become so easy to start a new business online. People are starting them up in their kitchen, as I mentioned earlier, but Shopify has really made it easy to start a website, but it's still really hard to start a business. And while the website and while the Shopify is a business, it's only half of it. Like it's the front end of the business. You really need to understand the back office, boring side of the business, a lot of people would call it, in order to really make that website grow and scale, and just making sure that you're actually, growing the business profitably and sustainably, because they're very different things. You can have the prettiest Shopify website in the world and the best photos and the best reviews on your social media or whatever, but if you don't have your numbers done on the back end of it, and you haven't priced in all your discounts and your shipping and your fulfillment, it's going to be really hard to make that business work long term.
100%. Such valuable points. So I suppose to kind of conclude and hopefully kind of spin these around, and these kind of hard fought lessons that you experienced can ultimately be a little bit of a playbook for success if we flipped on its head for brands operating today and people looking to kind of dive in the deep end and actually start a brand. We're looking at across those core components, data. So again, using profit-based metrics as a core indicator of success on a daily basis in an industry that's known for its complex cost structure. Number two, protecting your margin, making sure that you're not as quick to add those discounts in shipping if it doesn't actually serve the business overall. Number three, be very careful not to undershoot or miss opportunities with paid ads due to a lack of confidence. If things are working, double down on it, because it's a risk not to do so. It's a risk to stay stagnant. I suppose number four, make decisions with not only having that clear view of the data, but take action with it instead of making those emotional decisions. Is that a fair summary? Anything you'd add to that?
No, I think you've done a decent job at kind of articulating it pretty well. I think the discounts piece is one a lot of very early stage companies fall into the trap of. And it's fine to discount, it's not a problem, but use them sparingly, and if they are going to be a mainstay of your business, price them in day one. Businesses do this. Like there's a lot of businesses that are on sale all the time, but that's baked in day one. Where you're going to have a problem is if it's not baked in day one and then you're on sale all the time because you haven't priced that incorrectly, and therefore all of the forecasts and models that you've done your business on and your projections are pretty much null and void. You're trying to create some kind of forecast, I think, day one, not just for sales and marketing, but how many new customers do you need? What do you need to pay for a customer? And just trying to, I suppose, sense check that with other e-commerce business owners that is that actually realistic? What do you think? Trying to just speak to as many other operators as possible. But yeah, I think, your numbers are just as important as the product that you're going to sell. So think about them as independent projects that you need to work on, because that's exactly what they are.
So with everything, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Extra discounting has got to mean you're requiring a lower cost per acquisition in that example, and plenty of other analogies to kind of illustrate that same point. But yeah, great. I think hopefully this will be beneficial to the brands looking to kind of get a fresh perspective and a real world perspective more so on the realities of the day to day that I'm sure everyone experiences. It's not all roses. You hear about the kind of fancy case studies and people who kind of triple their spend day one and they know everything from the jump, but they're the small percentage of stories maybe as well.
Yeah, don't make all the mistakes I did, really, is probably my summary.
There we go.
Hopefully that
And
was of
funny
some
enough,
value.
exactly. And funny enough, there's a platform that's just popped up to solve these problems. It's funny how that works. But
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if I had a platform like StoreHero back in the day, maybe I wouldn't be here. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise. So yeah, I suppose that's my summary, really.
definitely. With that note, I'm glad that business sounds selfishly. Anyway, it's a good place to end. Thanks everyone for listening. I hope you
Cheers.
found value in this, and that's it. Thanks a lot.